Another great week of virtual racing. You can tell a lot of these drivers spent a lot of extra time in the simulator this week preparing, because this race actually, for large stretches of it, looked like a real NASCAR race. We're talking about Virtual Texas, the Pro Invitational Series today, y'all. How's it going? My name is Eric and welcome to Out of the Groove. We're here to talk about the eNASCAR Pro Invitational iRacing Series Race 2. This one at Texas Motor Speedway. I just got done watching it on FS1. It was also on Fox in a lot of areas. So cool to see Fox Sports kind of enhance or just kind of broaden their coverage of this thing even more so than last week. After last week's race was proven to be a decent success, you can tell Fox kind of went a little more all in this week. You had Troy Aikman, Hall of Fame NFL quarterback, giving the command. In a lot of ways, this race looked and felt very similar to last weekend's broadcast at Homestead Miami Speedway. You still had the great Mike Joy and Jeff Gordon calling the race in the booth. You had Clint Boyer as the in-race reporter, adding his very colorful and very entertaining commentary. He had a great bit. One of my favorite bits from today's race was when he was trying to talk through the guys, or when they were watching him try to go onto pit road, and you saw him go through the cars, miss his pit sign, have to jam it in reverse. That was interesting, especially to someone like me who doesn't really play iRacing, doesn't know a whole lot about it, still learning a lot on the fly. That was hilarious to see Boyer. That was great. It was a great bit. A lot of great bits. So the broadcast team was phenomenal. Camera angles were probably better than last week. They did a good job of catching a lot of the wrecks. Good job tracking battles for the lead battles up front. So kudos all around to everyone working the Fox broadcast. I know people at iRacing, their headquarters are actually managing a lot of the camera shots, so props to them. They made it look great. The broadcast was phenomenal. Last weekend was pretty smooth, and this week, really, they did not miss a beat. So great job by the whole broadcast team, but I want to focus most of this episode on the race, the actual action that happened on the virtual racetrack. And that's my big takeaway from today, is that this race at Texas Motor Speedway looked and felt a lot more like a real NASCAR Cup Series race would in real life. Last weekend at Homestead, the racing was exciting and close and tight and fun, but it didn't really look like Homestead Miami Speedway usually. I mean, the cars were all still kind of running around the bottom, which is fairly unusual. Everyone was running the same setup, so cars were kind of having a hard time passing. The draft was very much at play last week, and it was still in play this week. But today at Texas, it felt like there were more runs to be had. Everyone was once again running a fixed setup, but it was a different setup. I'm not entirely sure of how iRacing works. At Homestead Miami Speedway last week, they were running a very generic default setup. I think this weekend at Texas, they were all running a setup that was more tapered to Texas Motor Speedway, but still everyone was running the same equipment, the same stuff. So no setup was different, but maybe the cars just handled better, I think. But that all led to today's race at Texas looking and feeling more like a real NASCAR race. I think there were a few factors that really led to that. First and foremost, this week they only allowed the drivers to have one crash repair or fast repair, whatever it's called. Only one reset, whereas last weekend at Miami they got two. And I think as a result, yeah, the drivers still raced very aggressively today, but I think last weekend at Miami, some guys were just careless, especially mid-pack towards the back. I mean, I remember at one point up front, you just had William Byron clean out Chastain for the heck of it. That didn't really happen today. Well, it did actually happen once when Daniel Suarez tried to wreck Ty Dillon under caution and just missed. Oh, he got parked. They actually parked Daniel Suarez. It was late in the race, but they parked him. Suarez was having a good run before that. He spent most of the day in the top 10, but come on, Daniel, man. But other than that instance, I guess, most of the race was pretty clean. I think everyone was kind of giving a little bit more than they were taking, whereas last week it was all take, all take. It was like a NASCAR Heat 4 public lobby. This week there was definitely a more realistic balance of give and take. In real NASCAR, guys give a lot more than I think we realize watching. And people are not willing to put themselves at risk unless it's late in the race very often. And I think today's race at Texas, because they knew there was only one reset, and also because I think just in general, the industry clearly after last week's success got behind this race a bit more than they did last week. I saw a lot more live streams on Twitter. A lot of drivers were streaming their POV of the race. Like you could see them in their homes on their rigs. You could see plenty of drivers. Jimmy Johnson had it, Eric Jones had it. There was a lot of drivers that had streams, and some of them were sponsored. I saw like Toyota Racing had a live stream. They pointed out in the broadcast a couple times, but even inside the cars, in the actual virtual cars, sponsors had logos. Hellman's had their logo next to Dale Jr.'s name, whereas last weekend at Miami, I remember them specifically pointing out that the cars did not have sponsored logos inside the car. You could tell industry-wide, sponsors, everyone took this weekend's race a bit more seriously, and I think as a result, the drivers did too. They still had fun with it. It was still casual, very laid-back atmosphere, interviewing Timmy Hill immediately after winning the race, talking to Kyle Larson, Garrett Smithley, making the taco reference. Okay, that joke's funny, but it's gonna run its course eventually. All that during the pre-race still showed that this was a very lighthearted event, a very fun, relaxed, casual game, but they mentioned it a few times. A lot of drivers logged a lot of laps on the simulator this week and the nights leading up to this race to be prepared for today, because I think a lot of drivers, teams, and sponsors especially took this weekend's race more seriously than they took last weekend's race at Miami. And I think the drivers, obviously you saw that on the racetrack, there were not a lot of wrecks early on. Last weekend's race at Miami, there was a ton of wrecks in the first half of the race. This week, there really weren't that many wrecks in the first half of the race. In fact, they ran the first like 15 or 20 laps caution-free. They made it to a commercial break without a caution. I was shocked. Late in this race with all the restarts and overtime, a lot of wrecks. Okay, yeah, but that happens in real NASCAR. That wasn't super unrealistic, I'll be honest. So today's race looked and felt way more realistic. That was my big takeaway. I think if you were just a casual fan today, flipping through channels, you land on Fox, you land on FS1, and you start watching this race, if say you're like me, and I'm pretty much blind when I take these glasses off, everything's blurry right now. If I was just walking in the room and someone had that race on, the iRacing race on, with my glasses ooff, and the hearing what I was hearing and everything, I would have thought it was a real race. I would have. Now, obviously, everything's really blurry. I can't read anything on the camera. We've been recording for how many minutes? Obviously, if you put the glasses back on, pretty quickly you could tell it was still a video game, still a simulator and everything. But my point is, this race was extremely realistic. It made Texas Motor Speedway look better than it has in several years, I'll be quite honest with you. You know, you didn't really have multiple lanes. The bottom in 1 and 2 and the bottom in 3 and 4 were still by far the fastest lane. But you could hang in the outside lanes. You could make some moves if needed in the outside lane. So this was fun. A lot of aggressive moves being made down that backstretch. I know a lot of drivers predicted aggressive blocking, and sure enough, you could see it, especially going into turn 3. Guys entering on the apron practically going into turn 3. It was sketchy, and late in this thing led to some wrecks. But overall, this race was really entertaining, honestly. Last weekend's race was entertaining for the novelty of it. It was chaos, a lot of wrecks, a lot of different names shuffling to the front. Today's race, with its longer green flag runs, less cautions until the very end, really you could tell the iRacing veterans kind of rose to the top. That's why you saw William Byron lead most of this race. He again lost it late, just like last weekend's race, but led most of this race. You had Garrett Smithley, Timmy Hill ended up winning, obviously. Those are iRacing guys that are really good at iRacing. Parker Kligerman was up there. Alex LeBay, who won the last chance qualifier race to get into the main show here, he was up in the top 5, top 10 most of this race. The top 10 for most of this race were primarily iRacing veterans. Landon Castle is up there as well. Then once you got to about 10th on back, that's where you saw names like Kyle Busch pop up, Alex Bowman, Dale Earnhardt Jr. was back there for most of the second half of the race. That's where, you know, you had your typical Cup Series big names lurking, was around 10th on back. So that was interesting, and you didn't see it as much last week at Miami, mainly because of all the short runs and varying tire strategies. I mean, ultimately, last weekend's race at Miami, Timmy Hill and Garrett Smithley were the 2 best cars, but Hamlin and Jr. on fresher tires ultimately stole the show at the very end there. This weekend, with everyone on equal tires, with less cautions, less tire strategy, mixing the field up, the veterans, the iRacing experts, I would say, dominated. That's not entirely unexpected, but that's what we saw today, and it's pretty clear why. Just because everyone took it seriously, they weren't wrecking as much. I'll talk about the finish because this weekend's race had maybe not quite as nail-biting of a finish as last weekend's race. I mean, you basically had door-to-door 2 superstars of the sport coming to the checkers. That was tough to beat. That was gonna be tough to beat. This weekend's race, still, the margin of victory was probably less than 1/10 of a second. But before that final restart, the final pass for the lead happened when Timmy Hill got a great run down the front stretch, got up right behind William Byron, who dominated the race, and really for the first time all day, he was on Byron's bumper going into turn 1, and Timmy Hill just did not really lift, gave him just a small tap. Great save by William Byron, but that bump and run at 180 miles an hour is what sealed the deal for Timmy Hill. He took the lead, caution ensued shortly thereafter, and Hill was able to hold everyone off on the restart. So Timmy Hill, guy we don't talk about that much in the NASCAR Cup Series. He's been around for a few years now, but we don't talk about him there very much on Sunday usually. He gets probably the biggest win of his NASCAR career today on the virtual Texas Motor Speedway. iRacing's his bread and butter. He's one of the best in the world at it, and he showed everyone that today. And he showed everyone that at Miami last weekend. Timmy Hill, Garrett Smithley, I keep mentioning them because they were fast last week and fast this week. They're dominating this iRacing stuff. And all the veterans, the Denny Hamlins of the world, I know he won last week, but this week he was, you know, the Denny Hamlins of the world, Kyle Busch's, Jimmy Johnson's especially, even Bubba Wallace, Alex Bowman, guys who kind of were there by the end of this thing. They're clearly playing catch up to the young guys, the iRacing guys, you might say, of Timmy Hill especially. So Timmy Hill gets the win. Great move he pulled off on William Byron. William Byron tweeted afterwards, didn't seem to take it too hard. Led most laps, got moved out of the way. We'll get him back next time. And next time is going to be crazy. Bristol is next on the real NASCAR schedule, or it would be next if we weren't currently in a hiatus, but it is next for the iRacing schedule. No details have yet been announced, but we know Fox is going to be broadcasting it, or at least FS1, one of the Fox networks will be broadcasting the race next week. A specific day and time has not been announced, probably Sunday afternoon again, but Bristol Motor Speedway is next, and that Whew, that's gonna be something. A couple mile and a halves to get everyone used to it, warmed up to it, but now we're going to a beaten and banging, tough, fast, short track at Bristol. That's gonna be crazy. There's a few young drivers that had good days. I forgot to mention Ryan Preece, also John Hunter Nemechek, two of those other guys who still young, new Cup Series careers, but they've also made their names and they've been very good at iRacing and in the simulator in the past. I forgot to mention them earlier. They also ran in the top 5 for much of the day. Nemechek looked like one of the few cars that could hang with William Byron early on. Hill was probably the other one. And then Ryan Preece ended up finishing 2nd, I believe. And he was up battling in the top 5, top 6 at the end of last weekend's race as well. So Ryan Preece, credit to him, man. William Byron ended up finishing 7th after getting nudged out of the way, lost all his track position at the end there. Dale Earnhardt Jr. ends up 6th, so a 2nd and a 6th place finish for Dale Jr. these first 2 weeks. I don't know how that stacks him up, but he might be, if we were keeping track of points, like traditional points, Dale Jr. might be the points leader after that. I'd have to double check on that. I guess Timmy Hill finished, what, 3rd last week or 4th last week? Probably Timmy Hill and like Garrison. There's 3 or 4 guys up at the very top of the board, but Dale Jr. would be among them. 6th place this week, not bad for Dale Jr. Greg Biffle making his return once again, ended up 32nd. He was up in the top 15, top 20 late in this thing. Pinched Boyer on a restart, looked like, coming off a turn 2 and ended up getting wrecked. That hurt his finish, but cool to see Greg Biffle in the 16 back on track again. Last week's winner, Denny Hamlin, ended up 24th, but other than that, not a whole lot of other super notable finishing results. Jimmy Johnson, better result than last week, I'll give him that. 19th place this week, baby steps for the 7-time champion. He had a solid run going in the IndyCar iRacing race a couple days ago. I think he finished 16th after wrecking late, but he was running up in like around 12th or 13th, I think, by the time he spun, so not too bad of a run for Jimmy in the IndyCar side of things. 19th today, baby steps. He'll get there hopefully, but fun race today. Let's put this thing on the Groovy gauge. This is a really tough one to rank. Was the race as purely entertaining maybe as last weekend's at Miami was? I would say probably not, just because last weekend's race at Homestead Miami Speedway had a lot of leaders because there were a lot of cautions, a lot of restarts, a lot of shufflings on pit road, for example. But this weekend's race, I will say, was better in the sense that it looked and felt more like a real race. It felt like drivers were more in control of their destiny today. Because we had longer green flag runs, the best drivers clearly got the chance to show they were the best drivers in the simulation. And so we saw some great battles for position, a lot of great blocking. This race at Texas had multiple lanes at times, which is better than Texas in real life usually is able to produce these days. So overall, I gave last week's race a 90%. It's tough to compare this to last week's race just because last week's race was so new, so fresh, and it looked very different. Last weekend's race at Miami was pretty clearly a simulation. This weekend's race at Texas, again, if I take these off, it looks like the real thing. I'm gonna give this iRacing race at Virtual Texas a 92%. I'm gonna give it a slight edge over last weekend's race just because it looked and felt so much more real. It felt like a real NASCAR race at times today, other than, you know, you saw cars clipping through each other on pit road and when a couple times, I mean, DiBenedetto went flying at one point. Other than those minor hiccups, this weekend's race looked and felt very, very real, and it still had a good finish. Not quite as outstanding of a finish as Miami saw, but still a pretty exciting finish. And Timmy Hill, you could tell he earned this win. I mean, he ran up front all day long. He's great at iRacing. He's great at Texas, and he made a daring but pretty solid move on William Byron. Fair game in my opinion. He got to his bumper. It was the only shot he was going to have because the bottom lane was so overpowered. Giving a little nudge to him, and Byron saved it. He didn't wreck Byron, just nudged him a little bit, got him up out of the way. I thought it was a fair game move. Pretty cool move. So I'm going to give this race a 92%. But two very entertaining events put forth by NASCAR and iRacing the last couple weeks. Bodes well for the future of this thing. Let me know what you guys thought of this race down in the comments, of course. If any of you guys were there for the live stream I did before the race, the pre-race show I did with Jordan Anderson and Rajat Caruth, thanks for being there. We had a great turnout, had a lot of people watching, a lot of people leaving comments, asking those guys questions. That was really fun for me to just kind of host it. We'll see if we can make that more of a regular thing, a regular occurrence, because it looked like a lot of people really enjoyed it. And Jordan Anderson actually picked Timmy Hill to win the race, so kudos to Jordan with the race-winning pick. But that's all I've got for this episode today. Thank you all a ton for watching. Follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram, and also subscribe if you're new, because we do this all the time. Even during this NASCAR hiatus, we are still talking about the sport. Big thank you, of course, to my Patreon supporters as well. Could not do the show without the support I get from each and every single one of you, so thank you for continuing to support me and support the show. Check out that top link down below in the description if you also want to help out. Really, thanks a lot, guys. Couldn't do this without you. Got some more videos planned this week. I teased it in one of my last episodes, but I do have at least one driver planned to be on the show this week that I think a lot of you guys will recognize, so excited for that. And but I will see you then. We'll have other episodes planned as well, and it's gonna be business as usual over here. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you again very, very soon. Have a great rest of your weekend.